Welcome to Coffee with Claire. As you loyal fans know, we bring to you business leaders and entrepreneurs who like to give back and have fun. My guest today is Chuck Herrick. Chuck is a speaker and workshop leader who knows what it takes to turn adversity into opportunity. Growing up in a fractured and abusive household, he helped move on to a successful career as an attorney and tax professional by harnessing the power of spite and being intentional. Please help me in welcoming Chuck Herrick.
Thank you.
Hi, Chuck. Morning. Good morning. Thank you for being here. I'm so excited that you're here.
Yeah, thank you for doing this with this coronavirus and finding a new way to get this done and reach your audience. I appreciate it very much.
Oh, well, you have such an important topic. It's really, really something that everyone needs to hear. And what I'd love to do is just start with your story.
Okay. So one of my earliest memories is I was a boy about 4 years old, had a younger brother, Bill, about a year younger than me. And I remember this one time, this was back in the 70s when you had latchkey and we would just stay home and neighbors would check in on us. So it wasn't uncommon for us to be home alone and then, the neighborhood would run around. But I remember this one day my mom came home, and when she was mad and yelling, things were fine. You'd survive. She'd hit you, beat you a little bit. You'd maybe have to go to the hospital, but you'd be fine. But when my mom was quiet, that's when things were really bad. And this day, she was really, really quiet. She came in and sat on the couch. And I don't know why she did this, but every time she was really mad, we had to strip. So I remember she made us strip down, and she made me get this butcher knife out of our kitchen drawer. And I had to bring it to her. And I remember just slowly bringing it up to her. And she put it right here. And she looked at me straight in the eyes and said, "The world would be better off without you."
Oh, my gosh.
Now, I don't remember the rest of that day or many other times scenes like that played out in my life. But that was just the start of how I grew up. Eventually, she ended up marrying an abusive alcoholic who beat the crap out of her, abused me. And eventually at a certain point in my life, I was 16, 17 years old when I moved out and started to really try to figure out who I was. But I spent the next 3 years more drunk than sober. I mean, as you're probably aware, you've had many guests on, and those of us who grew up in that kind of home do anything because there's just this anger or fear that we try to numb, and we do it with anything we can, whether it's drugs, alcohol, sex. And I wasn't any different. So I spent the next 3 years just drunk. I mean, just trying to look for my next drink. My wake-up call finally came when this girl that I was sort of running around with told me, I'm pregnant. And I said, what am I going to do? I'm a drunk. I hadn't done anything. But that's the one, it made me really start to realize and become and change and turn my life around. What I had used up till then, when I was little, I had a lot, and looking back, spite is what kept me going, because what I wanted to do is, when my mom did that, it was just, I can survive tonight. If I can survive tonight, I can figure out what I need to do tomorrow. And I used and harnessed a lot of that power to keep me going forward and keep moving. And that's one of the things that I share when I go out and talk with people, because one thing that a lot of abused people have that I've seen is they have that anger where it's, if I can just get over this hurdle and get this done, then I can keep moving forward and change it tomorrow.
Wow. So you're saying spite is not really a bad word?
No, I don't think it is. No, it can be bad, but if you just use it, I mean, if you think like Tom Brady, this big switch that we have from him going to New England to Tampa Bay, I mean, think of his example. Everybody kept saying, you can't do it. You aren't good. You're this tall, gangly kid out of Michigan. I think he was Michigan. You'll never be a good quarterback. And he kept telling everybody, I'll prove you wrong. And he did. That's a good harness to spite. And we see a lot of people do that. It's like, oh, you'll never be able to do this. You'll never be able to do that. and then they go forward and they end up really doing it. You can really harness and use that spite as a fuel. So I don't think it's a bad word if you know how to use it. But what can happen, and so many times things happening in my life, I let it take control of me. And I ended up in a spot where, though it was really good from the outside, it wasn't where I needed to be or I was meant to be. And that's when you can start to cede power to other people, because they can learn to push that button and say, hey, I bet you can't do this. I bet you can't do that. And whether it's good for you or not, then you go and do it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, maybe like a movie star. Oh, I bet you'll never take your top off, or you'll never be in this kind of movie.
Right.
You know, and then they go and do it. And it's maybe not the best thing for them, but they let spite control them. That's when it can be bad. It's good when you sort of harness it for yourself and you say, okay, I can do this. I know I can do it. And I'm going to go show you I can.
So it's like a motivator for you to say, you know, okay, I'll show you.
Yeah, and it's exactly what it is. And too many people think that's a bad thing, but I really think you can harness it. But you've got to pay attention and be honest and intentional with what it is and why you're doing it.
Yeah. So, you know, it sounds a little bit like a power struggle. So this is more like an internal power struggle, external power struggle. How would you?
It's a little bit of both. Internally, you have to be brutally honest with yourself, and you have to say, why am I doing this? What is this really the best thing for me? So when somebody comes up and says, oh, I bet you can't do this, or you aren't good enough to do this, and you go out and you say, yeah, I'm going to show you, you have to be honest and intentional and say, is this really what I need to do, or what's the best thing for me to do? Versus just doing it because they said you can't. I mean, think of that kid, the 18-year-old kid who, oh, I dare you to go do this, or that double dare game we used to play as a kid. I mean, not all of it's good. So you have to be, as you grow up and become intentional and learn what really works for me, because if you don't, then you're ceding your power to everybody else and saying, you know, I'm going to let them control my life by just telling me what I can and can't do. And by almost like reverse psychology in a way.
Yeah.
They've learned your button, and they can go out and say, oh, I bet you can't go do that, Chuck. And then you go do it and you go, well, now I ended up hurt or doing something. I'm in a place I really didn't mean to be. I just did it because. And that's where that power struggle gets between the internal and external, and learning what really you need to do.
Yeah.
And what other people are trying to make you do.
And it sounds also like you have to learn how to discern what is your truth and, you know, versus somebody's opinion. You know, is that really true to me in my heart versus, you know, well, that's just what you think.
Yes, very much so. And that's what I call it, being brutally honest. You've got to be brutally honest with yourself. And sometimes it's hard, because when you do that, you have to decide what's good for you. And decision is just really cutting away. You know, it's like the sculptor who said, you know, I got this big piece of block. How did you make this statue? And it's, I just cut away all the pieces that weren't this. And I got down to the piece that's inside. And that's really what I think you have to do, is being brutally honest and being intentional with where you want to go.
Mm-hmm.
And if somebody comes along and you say, okay, my path is to get and be the next, the world's greatest 100-meter sprinter, and they say, well, I bet you can't eat this whole pizza, you aren't going to do that. That's not going to help you get where you go. But if you're going to run that next, you know, sprints or whatever, I'm not a runner. I have no idea. I see them train. Whatever they need to do to get to that goal, they aren't going to turn around and go, well, I'm going to go have that pizza and beer tonight. So you have to be intentional and brutally honest. What do I need to do? What's going to help me get where I want to go and help me go there?
Yeah. And I think a lot of people probably get stuck in that spot right before, you know, what you're talking about is being intentional. They don't know how to get from the stuck part here to being that intentional being that understands their truth. So how, you know, and it almost sounds like it could be a spiral, and it could either be a downward spiral, or if you could get over here, it could be an upward spiral. So how do you get yourself from here to there?
That's where I think spite comes in. And for me, that's the big motivator. Because if they say you can't do this, and you look and say, well, no, maybe I can't, but that's not where I want to go. Then you can use that fuel to say, I'm still going to push myself forward to speak my truth. And that spite can be a good fuel. You don't have to do it just to do, you going back to my reverse psychology example, to do what they said you can't. But you can use that to say, hey, I believe in myself. I know I can do it. And the other thing I think is you need to be open, because as bad as my childhood was, there were people along the way to help. You know, I remember at one of the worst points in our life, there was a sheriff's officer who opened up his house, and we stayed in his couch for about 9 months.
Wow.
While we were just trying to recuperate what was going on. So you've got to be open. And I think too many people, and this is again where spite can be bad, they will say, I've got to do it all on my own. And you need to be open and let people come in and help you, because there's so many people that want to help. But you've also got to look and say, okay, so for me, it would be, here's my goal. Here's what I really want to do. My intention. The fuel is that can be that spite, that base fire of I'm going to do it, because once that ignites, you can just keep fueling that. But be open as you go through, and learn to reach out for people and say, hey, I need some help. There are many resources out there that you can get. I mean, if you're in suicide, we've got the suicide hotline. Just like you have Healing Springs Ranch, if you're an addict, you can call people there. There are so many people that want to come together and help. And as we're learning going through this interview, I mean, we all know we have mutual friends that we didn't even know about. There's such a big community out there if you just open yourself up. If you're in school, one of the resources you have is community resource officers. They are more than happy to help. I mean, it's like spite not being a bad word. Not all police officers are bad. And sometimes I know that we have this stigma, but you need to go up and find somebody. It might not be that person, but they can get you in contact with somebody. So it's finding what your truth is, getting that spite to give you the fire to move forward, and then being open to look for some other people that might really want to help you and move you forward to get you on that goal, because you might not know how to get there, but somebody else might know how to do it. Just like you and I have done improv. And when you start, there's somebody to go through, because that's a whole different mindset of how you do something when you don't have a script and you have to go through this.
Right.
So there are many teachers along the way that can help you.
So it sounds like that spite can be harnessed, and that's kind of where your strength came through, to where you were able to get yourself on the path that you really wanted to be on and move yourself forward. What happens to the people who get stuck in that fear part before, and they instead of harnessing that spite, they kind of spin in this other direction? How can they redirect that ship and get to where you are?
What I think, and that's being brutally honest. You need to sit and look in the mirror. I mean, as an alcoholic, they would call it being rock bottom. And that's when you need to look in the mirror and say, okay, why am I here? And that's sort of when the girlfriend back then told me I'm pregnant. I had to look in the mirror and go, if I was on the path I was on, there's no way I was going to give my daughter the life that I wanted to. I was staying on that path, and I was going to let other people win and control my life. So you have to be brutally honest, because the easiest person to lie to is yourself. I mean, if you think about how many of us New Year's resolution, I'm going to get up and go to the gym in the morning, and then the next day rolls around 5 o'clock and that alarm goes off and you just want to hit the snooze button and go back to bed.
Yeah, right.
Or I'll do it after work. And then after work, everybody has a little part. Hey, we're going to go have a beer, go do this. Oh yeah, I'll get up early tomorrow. And it's that spiral. You have to be brutally honest and hold yourself accountable and say, okay, this is who I am. This is where I am, but this isn't where I want to be. Yeah. And until you look in the mirror, I don't think you'll ever quite move forward. And unfortunately, if you get stuck, that's when you need to be honest, look in the mirror, reach out for help, find somebody. The great thing about the internet now, there's tons of groups out there, tons of different people that you can reach out to and just try to communicate with.
Yeah, a lot of people really need to hear this message, because I think there's a lot of people that are at that point where they know they need to be brutally honest with themselves, or maybe they don't use that terminology because it's just not in their vocabulary, but they know that something needs to switch.
Yes.
And, I truly feel that people who speak from their heart and have actually lived through the experiences that they are speaking of, and to an audience who has also experienced that same thing, that moment in time can be the catalyst for them to get that spiral just switched
Yep.
from I'm going down here to I am going up here.
Yep. And that's one of the things that I know you've had Dr. Ed on, and he talks about the imposter syndrome. And that's one thing a lot of
Right.
us have when we go out and we try to meet people. We're like, well, everybody else has said this message before, so what unique voice do I have? But it's us going out and actually doing that, because you're right. When we connect with that audience and we come from the heart, it might not be me. It might be the next person that touches that person, but we're opening them up.
Yes.
With all our unique voices, we need to go out there and work and start to open up this community. And that's one thing I have. I'm not one of the rah type speakers. When I get on stage, I'm very blunt and honest. And the audience I generally connect with are those right on the edge, because we aren't in for the rah. We're
Right.
here, and we need to be. It's like the old Scared Straight videos they used to have, or sending people. That's where I seem to really connect, is I'll be in your face and get there. But it's getting that connection, knowing that you aren't alone, that really, really helps and get going forward to where you can provide it.
Yeah, and also, just giving them that space to even perhaps grieve a little bit, because you can get attached to that negativity too. You
Yes,
can, it's like, well, this is what my normal is, and so why would I want to give this up? Because it's uncomfortable to get to it, and it looks like really hard work. I don't want to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning to run. Why would I even want to try to, take this big thing on? It's a lot easier just to go get another drink, or just go numb myself with whatever else I'm going to do.
correct. And that's the hardest part, because it is really hard. It's hard work. And that's where you need to really sit down and look in the mirror and say, I'm ready to do this, or I need to move forward. And then what I say is, I just need to be 1% better every day. That's all I have to be. If I can just do one little thing every day, before long, my life's going to change and get better. Because it is really hard to look and say, well, I need to give up all my friends and move out and do all this other stuff.
Right.
But if you can just do 1% every day, that's all you need to do, and just keep slowly moving the ball forward to where in a year, you won't even know, how much your life has changed. You can just look back and say, wow, I've really changed this. And it's just little small incremental steps that people need to take to keep doing that.
Yeah. And so, is this the driver for you to share your experience? Because this is a very personal uh, experience and message that you're sharing with people you don't know. So is the motivation to get them, to get to that realization, or?
To get to that realization, to where if they can survive just one more night, because I really think if we can just survive one more night, and they can look back, and I'm not perfect, nobody is, but if they can look and say, hey, this guy did it, he survived the night, he went on and he kept just plodding ahead. There's a poem by a painter that I like, Marcus Pearson, called the Coyote series, and he talks about this coyote realizing that he wasn't meant to, if he could just fly, he could do anything. What he had to do is put his head down and keep pushing against the wall and just keep moving forward. And I've always thought of that. If I can just get in with somebody, shake them up just a little bit, get them to realize, get that one little connection, that glimmer of hope that they can survive that night. And then the next day, they can go forward. And I've seen the change. I do some volunteer work at the Dallas Children's Center here. And you can see some of the people that come in where they're on the edge, and you start talking with them, and you're just there to hold space and let them share their story. I've been there long enough now. I've seen some of the people that came in and they could barely get out of their own shell now start to come alive. And that's the whole motivation I have, is just, if I can reach that one person, just get that one person to open up and who knows what will happen? I mean, if you think something like Oprah Winfrey, the life she went through, I mean, here she was, and I'm not even talking about the horrific stuff she happened as a kid, but just she thought she was going to be a news anchor, and if she used spite, she would probably be some middle market, but she soon realized, hey, this isn't for me. I need to be the one interviewing people, and that's my gift. If I can just hold that space for one person and get them to open up, then they'll reach one more person and they'll reach one more. And that's really what I feel my calling is just to go out, and if I could find that one person and help them and get them going forward and make it just a better place for them, I've done what I'm supposed to do, or what I feel I need to do.
Yeah. And I know that you're a public speaker. And so what kind of places you feel like you're the best suited? What's your target audience?
I speak to high schools and colleges is mainly where I speak. Some addiction centers, I like to get in there because when I was drinking all the time, so I understand what that's like growing up with an alcoholic stepfather. I've seen that. I've been there. I have another good friend of mine who is also an addict. So he and I can share a lot of experiences, and we understand each other because that's something that you battle all the time. And getting in there and working with the kids, I really, really love that, because you can see that connection when those who are on the edge, I mean, we used to call them wallflowers, or you could tell they've been bullied, and getting in there and they just have somebody who can say, okay, he knows it. You can see that connection where you reach them. And it's just a wonderful and heartwarming feeling when you can reach them and they'll come up to you after and say, hey, thank you. I mean, that's the whole goal. And that's the audience I really, really like to talk to.
Yeah, and they need you so much. There's so many external influences with social media, and then internal influences from, the way they perceive themselves up against that social media, as well as their family influences. So all of this together can really help build a much stronger individual, and then leadership as they grow up and become the leaders of our communities and our world. So it's, definitely, I guess I might even think of it as a grassroots effort to really bring up, these kids, and see themselves in a different way that maybe they have just not ever allowed themselves to see themselves, because you started exactly where they are, and look at all that you have accomplished. And if he can do it, then, hey, how about me?
Yeah, it's like a diamond. I mean, they're being forged in this fire, and there's something about that. They're going to be a super strong person as they get older.
Right.
And who knows, once they get somebody to believe in them or reach out and touch them and honestly see them, who knows what they'll become. I mean, maybe they'll be the next Richard Branson. I mean, he felt like he was bullied, dyslexic, couldn't do anything. And look at what he does now, everything he gives back. I mean, who knows what they can be.
Yeah,
I mean,
and just being able to break those barriers down, and to break through the norms, and just be yourself and celebrate yourself with your gifts and your talents that you bring to the table. Because the world is changing, obviously, and it's gonna keep changing as we move through whatever this is, and people need to understand how to cope with it too. So. I really want people to be able to contact you. So how are people going to be able to find you, Chuck, and be able to book you for speaking engagements?
So I have a website. It's chuckherrick.com. You go on there. You can reach out to me. I've got a phone number, and you can just email me and we can talk about that.
Okay.
The great thing now is with this, we're finding whole new mediums like you are right here. So there's Zoom meetings that we can talk about.
Absolutely.
And that kind of stuff going forward. That technology is now probably going to explode. Maybe we'll meet the next one who wants to do that and build where we can have virtual, and it will look like something out of Star Wars where they had the people sitting in chairs and we can virtually see them. Awesome. That would be the best way to get a hold of me. Just go out to my website, look at that, send me an email, and I'll get back to you, and we can do that.
Awesome. Well, Chuck, thank you again for joining us here at Coffee with Claire. And thanks to our listeners and our viewers. Please make sure to like us on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter. Make sure that you subscribe to us on iTunes and take a look at us on our YouTube channel. So we will see you all next time on Coffee with Claire. Take care. Bye-bye. Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of Coffee with Claire. To learn more about today's guests, visit their website or find them on Facebook. To learn more about me, Claire Billingsley, follow me on LinkedIn or visit my website at coffeewithclaire.tv. And to hear more episodes of Coffee with Claire, subscribe, rate, and review the show on your favorite podcast and social media platforms.